look, she's going to cry now. How utterly pathetic.
The rain had been falling for 3 days when the Ashworth family gathered at Thornfield Park to celebrate Lucinda's engagement to Sir Robert Hartley. It was not the delicate, romantic sort of rain that poets wrote about, the kind that misted windows and made one long for a fire and a book. This was the relentless grey rain of late October, the kind that soaked through stone and settled into the bones of old houses, the kind that made tempers short and silences longer.
Pathetic.
Eliza Ashworth stood at the window of the yellow drawing room, her fingertips pressed against the cold glass. She watched the rain carve rivers down the pane and told herself she was not counting the hours until she could leave. She was 24 years old. She had been to 7 engagement celebrations in the past 3 years, each one for a cousin or a friend or a neighbor's daughter. And she had learned to perform contentment the way one learned to embroider or play a sonata, with practice, precision, and a complete absence of genuine feeling. Behind her, the room hummed with the particular energy of a family occasion. Her mother sat in the corner with her 2 aunts, their heads bent together over wedding fabrics, their voices a constant murmur of silk versus satin, white versus ivory, the merits of pearls, the scandal of short sleeves. Her father stood near the fire with her uncle, both men speaking in the low, satisfied tones of men who had successfully married off a daughter and expected to be congratulated for it. And in the center of the room, surrounded by admirers and well-wishers, sat Lucinda. Beautiful, golden, triumphant Lucinda, accepting compliments as though they were her due, which, Eliza supposed, they were. Lucinda had always been the kind of girl for whom life arranged itself pleasantly. She had been born beautiful. She had remained beautiful. She had learned early that beauty was a currency more valuable than wit or kindness, and she had spent it lavishly. Her engagement to Sir Robert, a baronet with 8,000 a year and an estate in Surrey, was not a surprise. It was an inevitability. The only question had been which of her many suitors she would choose, and she had chosen wisely. A man handsome enough to flatter her vanity, wealthy enough to satisfy her ambition, and dull enough to never challenge her dominance. Eliza turned from the window. The rain had hypnotized her into something like calm, and she did not trust it. She was not beautiful, not in the way Lucinda was beautiful, not in any way that mattered in drawing rooms and ballrooms. She was brown-haired, where Lucinda was gold, sharp-featured, where Lucinda was soft, and she had never learned to make her face say things it did not mean. When she was bored, she looked bored. When she was angry, she looked angry. And when she was hurt, which was more often than she would admit to anyone, including herself, she looked as though she might say something she would later regret. She had said many things she later regretted. It was, her mother often reminded her, her defining characteristic. The door opened, and Eliza felt the shift in the room before she understood what had caused it. The conversation did not stop. That would have been too obvious. But it changed. Voices became more careful. Postures became more correct. Her mother's hand flew to her hair. Her aunts exchanged a glance that communicated something urgent and unspoken. And then she saw why. The man who entered was tall, taller than any man in the room, with shoulders that seemed to fill the doorway, and a face that gave nothing away. He was not handsome in the soft, pleasant way that Sir Robert was handsome. He was handsome in the way that a storm was handsome, or a wolf, or a blade. There was something in the architecture of his face, the sharp jaw, the high cheekbones, the eyes the color of winter slate, that made one want to look away and look closer at the same time. He wore black, which should have been unremarkable, but on him it seemed like a statement, a warning. Eliza knew who he was before her uncle spoke his name. Everyone in England knew who he was. "Your Grace," her uncle said, crossing the room with the kind of eager deference that made Eliza's teeth ache. "We are honored. We had not expected, that is, when we sent the invitation, we never imagined you would actually." Except the Duke of Ashworth, for that was who he was, Marcus Blackwood, the 6th Duke of Ashworth, distant cousin to the family and the most powerful man any of them had ever stood in the same room with, did not smile. His voice was low and cool, the kind of voice that did not need to be raised to command attention. I found myself in the area, and I confess I was curious. Curious, Your Grace, to meet the young lady who has captured Sir Robert's heart. He said it without inflection, as though heart were a word he had read in a book but never used in conversation. His gaze moved across the room, passing over Eliza's mother, her aunts, the cluster of admirers, and landed on Lucinda. Miss Ashworth, I presume. Lucinda rose from her chair like a flower turning toward the sun. She was wearing rose silk, and she had never looked more beautiful, and she knew it. Your Grace, she said, dropping into a curtsy so perfect it might have been rehearsed. You honor us with your presence. Do I? The Duke's expression did not change. How fortunate. There was a ripple of uncertain laughter. No one was quite sure if he had made a joke. No one was quite sure of anything about him, Eliza realized. He was the kind of man who kept people off balance deliberately, who wielded his silence like other men wielded swords. She had heard the stories. Everyone had heard the stories. The Duke who had inherited his title at 22 when his father died in a hunting accident. The Duke who had been engaged once, years ago, to a woman who had died before the wedding. Some said of illness, some said of heartbreak, some said of something darker that no one would name. The Duke who had not smiled in public in 6 years. The Duke who had turned down every eligible woman in England and seemed determined to let his title die with him. He was standing less than 10 feet from her now, and she could see the lines around his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way his hands, large, capable hands, remained perfectly still at his sides. He was not relaxed. He was controlled. There was a difference, and Eliza had spent enough time controlling her own impulses to recognize it in someone else. Allow me to introduce my family, her uncle was saying, gesturing toward the various clusters of relatives. My wife, Mrs. Ashworth, my sisters, Mrs. Pemberton and Mrs. Crane, my brother-in-law, Mr. Crane, and, of course, my niece. Eliza, her mother interrupted, appearing at her elbow with the particular smile she wore when she was about to say something she hoped would be ignored. My daughter, Miss Eliza Ashworth. She is plain, Lucinda said, and laughed. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Eliza felt her face go hot and then cold. She had heard worse from Lucinda, much worse, but never in company, never in front of a stranger, never with that bright, careless cruelty that made it sound like a simple observation rather than a weapon. Lucinda, her aunt murmured, but it was too soft to be a reprimand. What? Lucinda's eyes were wide, innocent. I only meant, she knows I love her dearly, don't you, Eliza? But we must be honest. She's had 3 seasons and still no match. At some point, one must accept that perhaps marriage is simply not... Not what? The Duke's voice cut through Lucinda's like ice through silk. Lucinda blinked. I beg your pardon? Not what, Miss Ashworth? Not in her future? Not in her nature? Not in her stars? He had not moved, had not raised his voice, but something in the room had shifted. The temperature had dropped. The air had changed. I find I am curious what wisdom you are about to impart about your cousin's prospects. Please, continue. Lucinda's smile faltered. I only meant... Yes, you only meant. The Duke's gaze moved, slowly and deliberately, from Lucinda to Eliza. She felt it land on her like a physical weight, like a hand pressed against her chest. Miss Ashworth. Eliza did not know if he was addressing her or Lucinda. She did not know if she was supposed to speak or curtsy or flee. The other Miss Ashworth, he clarified. And now she was certain he was looking at her. Only at her. "I believe we have not been properly introduced." "We have not," she heard herself say. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Steadier than she felt. Calmer than she had any right to be. "But I suspect you already knew that, Your Grace." Something flickered in his eyes. It might have been surprise. It might have been interest. It disappeared before she could name it. "I did," he said. "I wished to hear you speak for yourself. I find that people reveal a great deal in how they respond to rudeness." The room had gone silent. Eliza could feel her mother's horror radiating from 3 feet away. She could feel Lucinda's fury, coiled and ready to strike. She could feel the weight of every eye in the room, waiting to see what she would do. She lifted her chin. "And what have I revealed, Your Grace?" "That you have restraint." He paused. "And that your restraint is costing you something." She did not know how to respond to that. No one had ever seen her restraint as anything other than good breeding. No one had ever suggested it might be a sacrifice. "Perhaps," she said, "it costs less than the alternative." "Does it?" His voice was soft now, almost gentle, and somehow that was worse than the coldness. "I wonder." He turned back to the room, and the spell broke. Conversation resumed. Her mother appeared at her elbow, hissing something about manners and impressions and the importance of not antagonizing dukes. Her uncle was steering his grace toward the refreshments, talking too loudly about the weather and the roads and the excellence of the local hunting. Lucinda had recovered her smile and was laughing at something Sir Robert said, though her eyes kept darting toward Eliza with something that looked like fury and fear combined. Eliza stood very still and tried to remember how to breathe. The Duke had defended her. Or, no, that was not quite right. He had not defended her. He had simply refused to let Lucinda's cruelty pass unremarked. He had forced her to see what she had done, and he had done it so quietly, so precisely, that Lucinda had been humiliated without any words being raised against her. It was, Eliza thought, the most elegant piece of violence she had ever witnessed. And when the Duke glanced back at her from across the room, just once, just briefly, his grey eyes finding hers with an accuracy that should not have been possible in a crowded drawing room, she understood something that she did not yet have words for. He had heard everything. He had understood everything. And he had not looked away. That night, Eliza dreamed of storms. She woke before dawn to a house still sleeping and a rain that had finally stopped. The silence felt strange after 3 days of constant drumming, expectant somehow, as though the world were holding its breath. She dressed without ringing for a maid, choosing the oldest of her mourning gowns, the brown wool that made her mother wince and Lucinda laugh. She did not care. The gown was warm and comfortable and asked nothing of her. And today, of all days, she wanted to be asked for nothing. The halls of Thornfield Park were quiet as she made her way downstairs. The house belonged to her uncle, and it was grand in the way that new money was always grand. Everything polished and perfect, and slightly too much. The carpets were too thick. The paintings were too large. The chandeliers dripped crystals like frozen tears. It was a house designed to impress, and Eliza had always found it exhausting. She slipped through the morning room and out the French doors into the garden. The rain had left the world washed clean. The grass was heavy with water, soaking through her half-boots in seconds, and the roses drooped under the weight of droplets that clung to their petals like tiny jewels. The air smelled of wet earth and dying leaves, and something else, something sharp and cold that spoke of winter coming. She walked without destination, following the gravel paths between the hedgerows, letting her mind empty of everything except the rhythm of her feet and the whisper of the wind in the bare branches above her. She had learned this trick years ago, how to walk herself into a kind of blankness, How to leave her thoughts behind, like a coat she could pick up later. It was the only way she survived these family gatherings. The only way she survived Lucinda. She rounded a corner and stopped. He was standing at the end of the path, near the old stone sundial, and he was watching her. The Duke of Ashworth looked different in the morning light. Less like a storm, perhaps. More like the aftermath of one. The still, grey air that follows thunder. He was not wearing a coat, only a dark waistcoat over a white shirt, and his hair was damp, as though he too had been walking in the wet garden. He looked younger than he had last night, more human, and also, somehow, more dangerous. Miss Ashworth. He did not sound surprised to see her. He did not sound anything at all. Your Grace? She considered turning back, retreating to the house, finding some excuse to avoid whatever this was. But her feet did not move. Her feet seemed to have decided without consulting her that she was staying. You are awake early? I do not sleep well in strange houses. He paused. I do not sleep well in familiar ones either, but strange ones are worse. It was more than she had expected him to say, more than she had expected him to admit. She filed it away like a card in a hand she did not yet know how to play. Nor do I, she said. I find that lying in the dark gives my mind too much room to wander. Where does it wander? The question was simple, but the way he asked it, direct, unhedged, as though he actually wanted to know the answer, made her hesitate. Nowhere useful, she said finally. Nowhere I would choose to go. He nodded, as though this made perfect sense, and turned back to the sundial. It was old, older than the house, carved from grey stone that had worn smooth with centuries of weather. The words around its face were half illegible now, but Eliza knew what they said. Tempus fugit. Time flies. I owe you an apology, the Duke said, not looking at her. Do you? For my behaviour last night. I embarrassed your cousin, and by extension, I embarrassed you. That was not my intention. What was your intention? He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, lower, rougher, as though the words were being pulled from somewhere deep. I intended to make her feel 1/10 of what you must have felt hearing those words. 1/10 of what she has probably made you feel 1,000 times before. He turned his head, and his eyes met hers. Was I wrong? Eliza did not answer. She could not answer. She was too busy trying to understand how this man, this stranger, this Duke, this person she had met for the first time less than 12 hours ago, could see so clearly what her own family refused to acknowledge. I have known women like your cousin, he continued, when she did not speak. I have been hurt by women like your cousin. I recognize cruelty when I see it, even when it wears a pretty face and a rose silk gown. His jaw tightened. Especially then. The woman you were engaged to, Eliza heard herself say. Was she? Yes. The word was clipped, final, a door closing. She should not press. She knew she should not press. Every rule of propriety and common sense and basic self-preservation told her to change the subject, to offer a polite condolence, to find some way to retreat to safer ground. But she had never been good at retreat. What happened to her? The silence stretched between them like a held breath. She watched his profile, the line of his jaw, the way his hands, those large, still hands, tightened at his sides. She died, he said, 3 weeks before our wedding. The doctors called it a fever. Her maid called it a broken heart. I called it. He stopped, swallowed. I called it many things. None of them fit. I'm sorry. Are you? He turned to face her fully, and there was something in his expression that she could not read. something that looked almost like hunger. You did not know her. You do not know me. Why should you be sorry? Because you are standing in a wet garden at dawn, telling a stranger about the worst thing that ever happened to you. Eliza's voice was steady, though her heart was not. And because I know what it is to carry something that heavy alone. He stared at her. She could not tell if she had offended him, or moved him, or simply confused him. His face gave nothing away. It was like trying to read the surface of a frozen lake, smooth and impenetrable, and possibly hiding something vast and dark beneath. What do you carry, Miss Ashworth? The question landed like a stone in still water. The knowledge that I will never be what my family wants me to be. She had not planned to say it. She had not planned to say anything at all. But the words came out anyway, true and raw and impossible to take back. The knowledge that I've tried so hard for so many years to be smaller, quieter, more palatable, and it has never been enough. It will never be enough. Because what they want is not a better version of me. What they want is someone else entirely. The Duke said nothing. He simply looked at her, and something in his gaze, some quality of attention, of recognition, made her feel as though she had been seen for the first time in her life. Someone like your cousin, he said. Yes. Someone beautiful and charming and empty. Yes. Someone who would never stand in a wet garden in a brown wool dress, speaking truth to a man she barely knows. Eliza felt something shift in her chest. I am not sure if that is a compliment, Your Grace. Nor am I. His voice was soft. But I think it might be. They stood there in the silence of the grey morning, two strangers who had somehow become something else without either of them intending it. The sundial cast no shadow. The clouds were too thick for that. But Eliza felt time passing anyway, felt it sliding through her fingers like water, like sand, like all the moments she had wasted trying to be someone she was not. I should go back, she said finally. My mother will notice I am missing. Will she? The question was not cruel. It was simply honest, and the honesty of it hurt more than any of Lucinda's barbs. Perhaps not, Eliza admitted. But the servants will, and they will tell her, and then there will be questions I do not wish to answer. The Duke nodded. Questions about why you were alone in the garden with me. Yes. Would it help if I told you I intend no harm? It would help, she said, if I believed that you knew what you intended at all. Something changed in his face. A crack in the ice. A glimpse of the water beneath. You are extraordinarily perceptive, Miss Ashworth. I have had practice. When no one wishes to speak to you, you learn to watch, you learn to listen. You learn to read the things people try to hide. And what do you read in me? She should lie. She should deflect. She should say something clever and evasive and safe. She did none of those things. Grief, she said. Guilt. Anger you have held so long it has become part of you. And underneath all of it, something that looks like hope but is terrified to name itself. The Duke went very still. You see too much. I know. Eliza smiled, though there was no joy in it. It is my other defining characteristic, along with speaking when I should stay silent, and staying silent when I should speak. Which is this? He asked. Speaking or silence? She considered the question, considered the man, considered the strange gravity that seemed to pull her toward him, despite every sensible thought in her head. I do not know, she said. I suppose we will find out. And then she turned and walked back toward the house, feeling his eyes on her the entire way. The celebration dinner that night was exactly as terrible as Eliza had expected. The table was too long, the candles too bright, the conversation too loud. Her mother had seated her at the far end, between an elderly aunt who was half deaf and a young cousin who had not yet learned to say anything that was not about horses. It was, Eliza understood, a deliberate exile, punishment for some unnamed crime, or perhaps simply a reflection of her value in the family calculus. The Duke sat at the opposite end, near Lucinda and Sir Robert and all the people who mattered. He did not look at Eliza. He did not seem to be looking at anyone at all. He answered questions when asked, ate when food was placed before him, and maintained an expression of such perfect neutrality that Eliza found herself wondering if he had practiced it in a mirror, or if it came naturally to men who had spent 6 years building walls around themselves. "More wine, miss?" A footman appeared at her elbow. "Yes, thank you." She should not. She knew she should not. Wine made her honest, and honesty at family gatherings was a weapon she could not afford to unsheath. But she was tired. Tired of watching Lucinda shine, tired of being invisible, tired of pretending that none of it hurt. She drank the wine and tried to listen to her cousin explain the difference between a trot and a canter. Across the table, Lucinda was laughing at something Sir Robert had said, her golden head thrown back, her white throat catching the candlelight. She was wearing pale blue tonight, the color of a winter sky, the color of innocence, and she looked like something from a painting, something too perfect to be real, something that would shatter if you touched it. "She is quite beautiful, isn't she?" Eliza turned. The elderly aunt, Aunt Millicent, she remembered now, was squinting at her through spectacles that were at least a decade out of fashion. "Lucinda?" Eliza managed. "Yes, she is." "You don't like her." It was not a question. Eliza opened her mouth to deny it, to produce some polite fiction that would smooth over the moment, but Aunt Millicent was already shaking her head. "Don't bother lying, child. I'm too old and too deaf to care about manners. I've watched that girl since she was in pinafores. She's got a mean streak a mile wide, and she hides it behind that pretty face." The old woman leaned closer, her breath smelling of sherry. "But you know what's worse than being mean?" "What?" "Being mean to family." Aunt Millicent's eyes were sharp despite her years. "You can be cruel to strangers and the world will forgive you. Be cruel to your own blood, and it tells everyone exactly what you are." Eliza did not know what to say. She had not expected wisdom from this quarter. She had not expected anything from this dinner except survival. "You're a good girl," Aunt Millicent continued. "Difficult, mind you. Too clever for your own good, but good. Don't let them convince you otherwise." Eliza's voice caught. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just survive. That's what women like us do." The old woman patted her hand and turned back to her plate, and Eliza was left staring at her wineglass, trying to understand what had just happened. A burst of laughter from the other end of the table drew her attention. Lucinda was telling a story, something about a ball she had attended, a gown she had worn, an admirer she had spurned. Sir Robert was watching her with the glazed devotion of a man who had never learned to look beneath surfaces. The other guests were leaning in, smiling, charmed. All except one. The Duke was watching Lucinda too, but his expression was different. It was the expression of a man cataloguing information, filing it away, building a case. And then his eyes lifted, and he was looking at Eliza. The moment lasted only a second, a single heartbeat, a single breath. But in that second, something passed between them. An acknowledgement, a recognition, a silent message that she could not quite decipher, but understood anyway. "I see you," his gaze said. "I know what you are surrounded by. I know what you endure." She did not look away. She could not look away. And when Lucinda's voice cut through the moment like a blade, of course, poor Eliza could never understand the pressures of too many suitors. Eliza did not flinch. She simply held the Duke's gaze and let herself feel, for the first time in years, that she was not entirely alone. The evening ended late, after port and cards and interminable conversation, and Eliza escaped to the library the moment she could do so without drawing comment. The library at Thornfield Park was the one room she genuinely liked. It was small by the standards of the house. Her uncle was not a reading man, but it was warm and quiet, and filled with the particular smell of old paper and leather that always made her feel safe. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, letting the silence settle around her like a blanket. She had survived. Another dinner, another evening, another performance of the pleasant, unremarkable daughter that her mother wanted her to be. She was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. It was the exhaustion of constant translation, of filtering every thought through the question of whether it would cause offense, of being someone other than herself for hours at a time. She crossed to the window and looked out at the dark garden. The moon was rising, painting the wet grass silver, and somewhere in the distance an owl called. A lonely sound, beautiful and sad. You should not be here alone. She did not startle. Perhaps she had been expecting him. Perhaps she had hoped. The Duke stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the light from the hall. He had removed his coat, loosened his cravat, and in the dimness he looked less like a duke and more like a man. A tired man. A lonely man. A man who had also spent the evening pretending to be someone he was not. "Nor should you," she said. "If anyone sees us, they will not." He stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. "Your mother and aunts have retired. The gentlemen are still at cards. The servants are in the kitchen, celebrating with the last of the wine." He paused. "I checked." "You checked?" "I wanted to speak with you, alone, without the performance." Eliza's heart was beating very fast. She told herself it was fear. This was improper, this was dangerous, this could ruin her if discovered. But she knew it was not. She was not afraid of him. She was afraid of herself, of what she might say, might feel, might want, if she let herself. "What did you wish to speak about?" He moved closer, not threateningly. There was nothing aggressive in his approach, but with a kind of deliberate intentionality that made her breath catch. "I wish to apologize again for what your cousin said at dinner. That was not your fault." "No, but I sat there and listened to it, and I did nothing." "What could you have done?" "I could have challenged her, publicly, humiliated her the way she humiliated you." His voice was rough. "I considered it. I came very close." "And why didn't you?" "Because it would have made things worse for you. Because she would have found a way to blame you for my interference. Because I have learned, painfully, that sometimes the best protection is invisibility." He stopped, less than 3 feet from where she stood. "And because you did not want me to." Eliza frowned. "How did you know that?" "Your face. When she spoke, you went very still. But you did not look at me. You deliberately did not look at me. And I understood that you were telling me something." He tilted his head, studying her. "You were telling me to let it pass." She had not known she was doing that. She had not known she was communicating anything at all. But now that he said it, she understood that he was right. "If you had intervened again," she said slowly, "it would have become about you, about what you thought of her, about defending me, and then I would have been reduced to someone who needed protecting, someone who could not fight her own battles." "Can you?" "Fight my own battles?" She smiled, though it hurt. "I do not know. I have never been allowed to try. Every time I open my mouth to defend myself, I am told I am being difficult, ungrateful, unfeminine, and so I have learned to stay silent. And my silence is praised as virtue, and all the while the things I want to say are rotting inside me." The Duke said nothing for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer, more raw. "My fiancée," he said, "the woman who died. Her name was Charlotte." Eliza went still. "She was beautiful, charming, everything a duchess should be. Everyone loved her. Everyone said how lucky I was." He paused, and in the moonlight she saw his jaw clench and release. "I did not know. For a very long time I did not know that she was cruel. Not to me, to others, to servants, to people she considered beneath her. She hid it well. She hid everything well, until she could not." "What happened?" He stopped, started again. "She was unkind to someone who did not deserve it, someone who had no power to fight back. And that person, a girl, a housemaid, barely 16, she died. Not directly. Charlotte did not push her down the stairs or hold a pillow over her face. But she created the conditions. She made the girl's life so unbearable that the girl found her own way out." Eliza felt something cold move through her. "I am so sorry." Charlotte did not see it that way. She did not see it at all. When the girl died, Charlotte was annoyed at the inconvenience, at having to find a replacement. His voice was barely audible now. "And I realized that I had been in love with someone who did not exist. That the woman I thought I knew was a performance, a mask. And underneath the mask was something I could not love. Something I could barely look at." "Did you end the engagement?" "I tried." He laughed, and it was the most terrible sound she had ever heard. Hollow, broken, full of ghosts. "I tried, and she found out, and 3 weeks later she was dead. The doctors said fever. Her maid said heartbreak. I say..." He stopped, breathed. "I say she could not bear to be seen, to be truly seen." And so she stopped. Eliza did not know what to do. Every instinct told her to reach for him, to touch his hand, his arm, his face. But she did not know if touch would help or harm. She did not know anything except that this man had just given her a piece of himself that he probably had not given to anyone in years. "You blame yourself," she said quietly. "Should I not?" "No." The word came out firmer than she intended. "No, you should not." She made her choices. She lived the way she lived, and she died the way she died. And none of that is your fault. I should have seen sooner. I should have known. How? How could you have known? You said yourself she hid it. Eliza took a step closer, closing the distance between them until she could see the shine of tears he was refusing to shed. You loved who you thought she was. That is not a crime. That is just human. He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw something that made her breath catch. It was not gratitude exactly. It was not relief. It was something closer to wonder. The wonder of a man who had expected judgment and received mercy instead. You are remarkable, he said. Do you know that? I am not. Her voice shook. I am awkward and difficult, and I say the wrong thing and I cannot. You are remarkable, he repeated, and this time there was something fierce in it, something that would not be contradicted. You are honest when honesty costs you everything. You see truth when everyone around you is willfully blind. You carry cruelty with grace and silence when you should be screaming. Perhaps I should scream. Perhaps you should. He reached out, slowly, giving her time to pull away, and his fingers brushed her cheek. The touch was so gentle it hurt. Perhaps we both should. Eliza closed her eyes. She could feel the warmth of him, the nearness of him, the impossibility of him. She could feel all the years of loneliness pressing against her chest, all the words she had swallowed, all the tears she had refused to shed. And she thought that if she did not move away right now, something was going to break, and she did not know if she would survive the breaking. "Your Grace," she whispered. "We cannot." "I know." His hand fell away. "I know." But he did not step back, and neither did she. They stood there in the moonlit library, two people who had just discovered each other, two people who had both been alone for far too long, two people who knew, as surely as they knew anything, that whatever was happening between them was not nothing. It was not nothing at all. The next 3 days passed in a fever of looks and silences and conversations that said everything and nothing. They never spoke alone again. There was no opportunity, no safe moment when they could risk being seen. But they did not need words to communicate. A glance across the breakfast table, a brush of hands when passing in the hall, a moment in the garden when Eliza stooped to pick up a fallen book and looked up to find him watching her, with an expression that made her forget her own name. Lucinda noticed. She did not say anything. Not directly. Not yet. But Eliza could see the calculation in her cousin's eyes, the way she tracked the Duke's attention like a hunter tracking prey. Lucinda was not accustomed to being upstaged. She was not accustomed to losing. "You are playing a dangerous game, cousin." Lucinda cornered her in the morning room on the 3rd day, when the other women had stepped out for a turn in the garden. "The Duke is not for you." "I am not playing anything." Eliza kept her voice calm, though her heart was racing. "I barely know the man." "You barely know him, and yet he looks at you as though you are the only person in the room." Lucinda's voice was silky, dangerous. "It is pathetic, really, embarrassing, the way you must throw yourself at any man who shows you the slightest attention." "I have thrown myself at no one." "Haven't you?" Lucinda stepped closer, and for a moment, Eliza saw the cruelty beneath the beautiful face, saw the cold, calculating thing that lived behind those innocent blue eyes. "You forget, cousin. I know what you are. I know you are desperate. I know you are invisible. And I know that the Duke, whatever game he is playing, will never choose someone like you over someone like me." Eliza felt the words land like blows. She felt them burrow into the soft places inside her, the places she had spent years trying to protect. She felt her eyes sting with tears she would not shed. And then she heard a voice from the doorway. "I beg to differ." Lucinda spun around. Her face went white. The Duke of Ashworth stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable, his eyes fixed on Eliza's cousin with a coldness that made the room feel like winter. "Your Grace," Lucinda stammered. "I did not see." "No." He stepped into the room. "You never do. You never see the harm you cause, the pain you inflict, the wounds you leave behind. You never see because you do not care to look." "I was only—" "You were only what? Speaking truth, offering guidance, helping your poor, unfortunate cousin understand her place." His voice was quiet, but there was steel beneath it. "I heard what you said, every word, and I find I have something to say in return." Lucinda's mouth opened, closed. She looked like a fish gasping for air. "Miss Eliza Ashworth," the Duke said, not looking away from Lucinda, "is worth 10 of you, 100 of you. She has more grace in her silence than you have in all your performances. She has more courage in her restraint than you have in all your cruelty. And if she would have me—" He stopped. Eliza could not breathe. She could not think. She could not do anything except stand there and stare at the man who had just dismantled her cousin's cruelty and was now turning toward her with something in his eyes that looked like hope and terror combined. "If she would have me," he said again, and this time his voice was softer, meant only for her. "I would spend the rest of my life proving that she is exactly what I want, exactly who I want. No one else." The room was silent. Lucinda made a small, strangled sound and fled. Eliza did not watch her go. She could not look away from the Duke's face. "You should not have done that," she whispered. "I should have done it sooner." He took a step toward her. "I should have said it the first night. The moment I heard her laugh at you, I should have. She will never forgive you. She will tell everyone." "Let her." Another step. "Let her tell the world that the Duke of Ashworth heard her cruelty and called it what it was. Let her tell them that I defended you. Let her tell them that I am in love with you." Eliza's heart stopped. "You... what?" "I love you." The words fell from him like stones, like confessions, like prayers. "I have loved you since you stood in that garden and told me the truth about myself. I have loved you since you looked at me without fear and without expectation and without wanting anything from me except honesty. I have loved you, Eliza Ashworth, and I do not know how to stop, and I do not want to try." She was crying now. She could feel the tears on her cheeks, warm and salt, and impossible to stop. "I am not what you need," she said. "I am difficult and awkward, and I say the wrong things. You say the right things, the true things, the things everyone else is too cowardly to say. I will embarrass you. You could never embarrass me. I am not beautiful. You are." He closed the distance between them and took her face in his hands. Those large, gentle hands that she had watched for days, that she had dreamed about, that she had wanted without letting herself name the wanting. "You are beautiful. Not in the way the world understands beauty. Not in the way that gets painted and praised and put on display. You are beautiful in the way that matters, in the way that lasts." She closed her eyes. She felt his thumbs brush away her tears. She felt the warmth of him, the nearness of him, the impossible, terrifying reality of him. "I do not know how to do this," she whispered. "Neither do I." His forehead touched hers. "We will learn together." When he kissed her, softly, carefully, as though she were something precious that might break, Eliza understood, for the first time in her life, what it meant to be chosen. Not because she was beautiful, not because she was convenient, not because she fit some idea of what a woman should be, because she was herself, difficult and honest and imperfect and real. And he wanted her anyway. He wanted her because. The scandal broke over breakfast the next morning like a wave over a small boat. Lucinda had told her mother, who had told Eliza's mother, who had told everyone else, and by the time Eliza came down to the dining room, the entire family was waiting with expressions that ranged from horrified to furious to delighted in the particular way that meant someone else's misfortune was providing excellent entertainment. "Is it true?" Her mother's voice was shaking. "Is it true that that you and the Duke?" "Yes." Eliza sat down and reached for the toast. Her hands were not trembling. Her voice was not trembling. Something had changed in her since yesterday. Some wall had fallen. Some chain had broken. and she found that she no longer cared what they thought. "The Duke has proposed. I have accepted." The silence that followed was deafening. "You accepted?" her mother repeated, as though the words were in a foreign language. "You accepted a proposal from a duke? Is that so difficult to believe?" "Yes." Lucinda's voice cut through the stunned quiet like a blade. "Yes, it is. Because he was supposed to. Everyone knows he was supposed to." "Propose to you?" Eliza looked at her cousin and saw, for the first time, how small Lucinda really was. How frightened. How desperate to matter, to shine, to be the center of everything. "Is that what you thought? That you would add a duke to your collection alongside Sir Robert?" "I didn't mean—" "You always mean." Eliza stood up, leaving her toast untouched. "You meant every cruel word you ever said to me. You meant every laugh, every taunt, every casual destruction of my confidence. You meant it, Lucinda, because meaning it made you feel powerful, made you feel better about yourself." "Eliza," her mother's voice was sharp, "you will not speak to your cousin that way." "Why not?" Eliza turned to face her mother. "Because it is rude, because it makes people uncomfortable, because good girls stay silent and let themselves be eaten alive, piece by piece, until there is nothing left. Because it is not done." "Then perhaps it should be." Eliza felt something expand in her chest. Something that had been compressed for years, for decades. Something that had been waiting for permission to breathe. "Perhaps we should speak about the cruelty we endure. Perhaps we should name it. Perhaps we should stop pretending that silence is the same as strength." She walked out of the dining room without looking back. She found the Duke in the garden, standing by the old sundial, waiting for her as though he had known she would come. "They know," she said. "I assumed they would." "They are not pleased." "I assumed that as well." She stopped beside him and looked at the sundial, at the worn words around its face. "Tempus fugit. Time flies." "My mother thinks I have ruined myself," she said. "My cousin thinks I have stolen something that belonged to her. My aunt thinks I have acted above my station." "And what do you think?" Eliza considered the question. Considered the sun breaking through the clouds for the first time in days, painting the garden in gold and green. Considered the warmth of the man beside her, the steadiness of his presence, the knowledge that whatever came next, she would not face it alone. "I think," she said slowly, "that I have spent my entire life trying to be small enough to fit into the space they made for me. And I think I am done. I think I would rather be too much than not enough." The Duke took her hand. His fingers wove through hers, warm and strong. "You are not too much," he said. "You are exactly the right amount. It is the space that was wrong." She turned to look at him, this man who had seen her, truly seen her, from the very first moment. This man who had recognized her pain and named it. This man who had chosen her, not despite who she was, but because of it. "I love you," she said. The words came easily now, like water finding its path downhill. "I did not know that I could. I did not know that I was allowed. But I love you, and I'm not going to apologize for it." He smiled. It was the first real smile she had seen from him. Not a polite curve of the lips, not a practiced expression, but a smile that came from somewhere deep and true and human. It transformed his face. It made him look like a man who had just discovered something he thought was lost forever. "Nor should you," he said. "Nor will I." And when he kissed her again, there in the sunlit garden, Eliza understood that this was what it felt like to come home. Not to a place, but to a person. Not to safety, but to something better. to recognition, to acceptance, to the particular grace of being known. The wedding was small, against all tradition and expectation. Eliza had wanted it that way, and the Duke, Marcus, she called him now when they were alone, had agreed immediately. A large wedding would have meant Lucinda and her mother and all the rest of them, watching from the pews with their false smiles and their real resentment. A small wedding meant only the people who mattered. They married in the chapel at Ashworth Hall, the Duke's ancestral estate, on a cold December morning when the world was white with frost. Eliza wore grey silk, not white, not ivory, but the silver grey of winter dawn, of storm clouds breaking, of something ancient and unforgiving learning to soften. Her Aunt Millicent sat in the front pew, clutching a handkerchief and weeping, with what Eliza suspected was genuine joy. The vows were simple. The promises were enormous. "I will see you," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. "Every day I will see you. The real you. The difficult, honest, extraordinary you. I will not look away." "I will stay," Eliza answered. "When it is hard, when you are grieving, when the ghosts of the past come calling, I will stay, and I will remind you that you are not the man you were before, but we are both becoming something new." And afterward, when they walked out of the chapel into the cold, bright morning, Eliza looked up at the sky, clear and endless and full of possibility, and felt something she had never felt before. She felt free. 3 years passed like a held breath, like a prayer, like a slow unfurling of everything that had been compressed and hidden and waiting. Eliza learned the shape of her husband, not just his body, though she learned that too, learned the scar above his left eyebrow, and the silver flecks in his eyes, and the way his hands trembled when he touched her, as though he could not quite believe she was real. She learned his silences and his fears. She learned the dreams that woke him in the night, and the memories that made his jaw tighten, and the words he could not say even after all this time. And he learned her temper and her impatience, and her tendency to say exactly the wrong thing at exactly the wrong moment, her fear of being invisible, her terror of being too much, the way she cried when she was angry, because her body did not know how else to express the enormity of feeling, and the way she laughed when she was nervous, and the way she went quiet and still when she was truly happy, as though she needed all her attention to hold the joy. They fought. Of course they fought. Two people who had spent their lives building walls did not tear those walls down without debris, without casualties, without moments when the old defenses rose up and demanded recognition. But they learned to fight in ways that did not destroy. They learned to say, "I am hurt," instead of, "You are wrong." They learned to reach for each other, even when reaching felt like surrender. And slowly, gently, like spring returning after a long winter, they learned to be happy. On the morning of their 3rd anniversary, Eliza woke to an empty bed and a note on the pillow. "Come to the garden." She dressed quickly, not bothering with stays or elaborate hair, and made her way outside. The garden at Ashworth Hall was different from the one at Thornfield Park. Older, wilder, full of roses that had been growing since the house was built 300 years ago. In spring, it smelled like heaven. In winter, when the roses were sleeping, it smelled like potential. Marcus was standing by the fountain at the garden's center. He was holding something, a small bundle wrapped in a blanket, and when Eliza got closer, she saw his face, and her heart stopped. He was crying. "What is it?" She rushed toward him. "What's wrong?" "Nothing is wrong." His voice was choked with something that was not grief. "Nothing is wrong, Eliza. Everything is. Look." He turned the bundle so she could see. A baby. A tiny, perfect, sleeping baby, with dark hair and a rosebud mouth, and the smallest hands Eliza had ever seen. "I don't understand," she whispered. "The vicar's wife, her sister. She died in childbirth last week." Marcus's voice was shaking. There was no family, no one to take the child. They were going to send her to the parish, to the workhouse, and I could not let her. Eliza reached out, and her fingers brushed the baby's cheek. So soft, so impossibly soft. "It's a girl." A girl. Marcus looked at her, and in his eyes she saw everything. The grief he had carried for years, the guilt, the ghosts, and underneath all of it, something new. Something fragile and fierce and full of hope. "Her name is Margaret. The mother wanted her called Margaret. But I thought, if you agree, I thought perhaps we could call her Meg." Eliza could not speak. She could not do anything except stare at the tiny creature in her husband's arms, this unexpected gift, this impossible second chance. "We always said," she managed finally, "that we would find our own way, that we would build something different. We did. This is different." "Yes." She looked at Marcus, at the tears on his face, the hope in his eyes, the way he held the baby as though she were made of glass and gold. "May I hold her?" He placed the child in her arms, and Eliza felt the weight of her, so small, so light, so utterly dependent on the kindness of strangers who were about to become her parents. She looked down at the sleeping face, at the tiny fingers curled against the blanket, and she understood something that she had been trying to understand her whole life. You did not have to be born into a family to belong to one. You did not have to be chosen first to be chosen fully. You did not have to be beautiful in the way the world understood beauty to be worthy of love. You just had to show up. You just had to stay. You just had to let yourself be found. "Hello, Meg," she whispered. "I'm your mother, and this is your father, and we are going to love you so much that you will never, ever doubt your place in the world." The baby stirred, opened her eyes, grey eyes like storm clouds, like steel, like something ancient and unforgiving that was learning to soften. And for a moment, Eliza could have sworn she smiled. 10 years later, on a spring morning when the roses were in full bloom, Eliza sat on the terrace at Ashworth Hall and watched her family. Meg was 9 now, tall and serious, and possessed of an intellect that startled her tutors and delighted her parents. She sat cross-legged on the lawn, reading a book that was probably too advanced for her and would probably give her nightmares, and refusing to come inside despite the grass stains on her dress. Her brother Thomas, born 2 years after Meg's arrival in a labour that nearly killed Eliza and would have killed a lesser woman, was 7 and loud and in love with horses and entirely incapable of sitting still for more than 30 seconds at a time. He was currently chasing the gardener's cat through the rose bushes, shouting something about pirates. And the twins, Eleanor and James, 4 years old and terrible in the way that all 4-year-olds are terrible, were attempting to build a castle out of stones near the fountain, with mixed results and much shrieking. Marcus emerged from the house and came to stand beside her. His hair was grey at the temples now, and there were lines around his eyes that had not been there when they married. But his hands were still steady, and his gaze was still sure, and when he looked at her, she still felt seen. "The Thornfields are arriving this afternoon," he said. "Your mother sent word." Eliza sighed. "All of them?" "All of them." "Including Lucinda?" "Including Lucinda." Eliza looked out at her children, her extraordinary, chaotic, impossible children, and felt a wave of something that was not quite satisfaction and not quite triumph, but somewhere in between. Lucinda had married Sir Robert as planned. The marriage had lasted 3 years before he left her for a widow in Bath, with better conversation and fewer complaints. Lucinda had returned to her mother's house, bitter and beautiful, and unable to understand what had gone wrong. She visited Ashworth Hall once a year at Christmas, and spent the entire time making comments about Eliza's unfashionable gowns and undisciplined children. Eliza had learned, over the years, to find this amusing rather than painful. "Shall I tell them we have a prior engagement?" Marcus asked. "No." Eliza reached for his hand. "No, let them come. Let them see." "See what?" "What they missed." She smiled up at him, this man who had found her when she was lost, who had chosen her when she was certain she was unchosen, who had built this life with her brick by brick and year by year until it was something solid and real and theirs. What they could never understand. Marcus lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her fingers. "And what is that?" "That this." She gestured at the garden, the children, the house that had become a home, the life they had built from ruins and hope and sheer stubborn refusal to give up. "This is what matters, not titles or beauty or the opinions of people who never took the time to see you clearly. Just this. Just us. Just love." Thomas came running toward them, covered in dirt and leaves and joy, and flung himself into Marcus's arms with the absolute confidence of a child who has never doubted his welcome. "Papa, the cat bit me." "Did you deserve it?" "Only a little." Marcus laughed, that rare, full laugh that Eliza had learned to treasure, and hoisted his son onto his shoulders, and Eliza watched them and felt her heart expand until she thought it might burst. She had been told for so many years that she was not enough, not beautiful enough, not charming enough, not quiet enough, not good enough. She had believed it, sometimes. In the dark hours of the night, in the long years of loneliness, she had believed that there was something fundamentally wrong with her that made her unworthy of love. She had been wrong. Not wrong to feel the pain. The pain was real, and it had shaped her, and she would carry the scars of it always. But wrong to believe that the pain defined her. Wrong to believe that she deserved it. Wrong to believe that there was only one way to be valuable, and she had failed to achieve it. She was not beautiful in the way Lucinda was beautiful. She was not charming in the way society demanded charm. She was difficult and honest, and often too much, and occasionally not enough. And none of that mattered, because the people who loved her for exactly who she was. That was the secret no one had told her. That was the truth she had to discover for herself. You did not have to change to be worthy of love. You just had to find the people who could see you clearly. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, if you were stubborn enough, if you refused to give up, those people found you first. The carriage carrying the Thornfield family arrived at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, just as Eliza had arranged for tea to be served on the terrace. She had learned, over the years, that meeting Lucinda required certain preparations. Excellent tea, comfortable seating, and the presence of at least 2 children to provide distraction. Today she had all 4 children, which was perhaps overkill, but she did not mind. Lucinda emerged from the carriage first, followed by her mother and 2 of Eliza's aunts. She looked older. They all looked older. But she had aged in the way that women who have spent their lives being beautiful sometimes age, with a kind of bewildered resentment, as though time had broken a promise she had never realized was conditional. "Eliza." Lucinda's smile did not reach her eyes. It never did. "How well you look." "As do you." Eliza gestured toward the terrace. "Please, come and sit. The children are eager to see you." This was not precisely true. The children had been bribed with extra dessert to be polite, and Meg had extracted a promise that she would not be required to converse with Lucinda for more than 5 minutes. But the fiction served its purpose, and the family settled themselves on the terrace with minimal awkwardness. Tea was poured. Sandwiches were consumed. The twins displayed their rock collection to an audience that was politely indifferent. Thomas demonstrated his ability to whistle through his fingers, which impressed no one but himself. And Meg, brilliant, serious, extraordinary Meg, sat quietly with her book and watched everything with eyes that missed nothing. "The children are growing so fast," Eliza's mother said, in the tone of someone searching for something positive to say. "Before you know it, you'll be bringing Meg out into society." "Will I?" Eliza smiled. "I rather thought I'd let her decide for herself what she wants to do with her life." "But surely, Margaret wants to study medicine," Marcus said, appearing at Eliza's side with a fresh pot of tea. "She has informed us that she intends to attend university and become a surgeon." The silence that followed was exactly as satisfying as Eliza had imagined. "A surgeon?" Lucinda's voice was faint with horror. "But she's a girl." "Yes." Marcus's tone was mild. "We had noticed." "And you're going to let her?" "We are going to support her in whatever path she chooses." Eliza met Lucinda's eyes and held them. "That is what parents do, is it not? Support their children's dreams, rather than forcing them into shapes they were never meant to fill." Lucinda's mouth opened, closed. For once, she had nothing to say. Meg looked up from her book, met Eliza's eyes, and smiled. It was a small smile, private and knowing. The smile of a child who understood that she was being defended and appreciated it more than words could express. "May I be excused?" Meg asked. "I want to show grandmother the new litter of kittens in the stable." "Of course, darling." Meg rose, tucked her book under her arm, and held out her hand to Eliza's mother with all the grave politeness of a future surgeon and a current child who had learned exactly how to manage adults. "Grandmother, the orange one is my favorite. I named her Clementine." They disappeared toward the stables, and Eliza watched them go with a heart that felt impossibly full. This was what she had wanted, she realized. Not the title, not the house, not even the love, though she wanted that too, wanted it desperately. What she had wanted, more than anything else, was this: the chance to raise children who knew they were seen, who knew they were valued, who would never, ever doubt their place in the world. She had been that doubting child once. She had been the girl at the window, watching the rain, wondering if she would ever matter to anyone. Now she was the woman on the terrace, watching her daughter walk away with her head held high, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, Meg would face them with the knowledge that she was loved exactly as she was. That was the gift Eliza could give her. The gift no one had given Eliza. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. Later that night, after the family had gone, and the children were in bed and the house had settled into the particular quiet of evening, Eliza found Marcus in the library. He was standing at the window, looking out at the moonlit garden, and something in his posture made her pause in the doorway. "What are you thinking about?" He turned, and she saw the shine of unshed tears in his eyes. "Charlotte," he said quietly. "I was thinking about Charlotte." Eliza crossed the room and stood beside him. She did not touch him yet. She had learned to wait, to let him come to her when he was ready. "What about her?" "I was thinking." He paused, swallowed, tried again. "I was thinking that she would not recognize me now. The man I was when I knew her, angry and cold, and so convinced that the only way to survive was to feel nothing. That man is gone. And in his place," he gestured at the room around them, at the house, at the life they had built. In his place is this person who can laugh at his children's jokes, and cry at his wife's kindness, and feel everything, all the time, without fear. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It is a terrifying thing. He turned to face her fully. It is a terrifying thing, and I would not give it up for anything. Eliza reached for him then, and he came to her, folding himself into her arms with a sigh that seemed to release years of tension, years of grief, years of carrying weights he had never asked to carry. "I love you," he said into her hair. "I love you so much it frightens me sometimes." "I know." She held him tighter. "I know exactly what you mean." They stood there for a long time, two people who had found each other against all odds, two people who had chosen to be brave when bravery felt impossible, two people who had learned, slowly and painfully and beautifully, that love was not a destination, but a practice, something you did every day, something you chose over and over, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. "Come to bed," Eliza whispered finally. In a moment. Marcus pulled back, looked at her with those grey eyes she had learned to read like a language. "I just want to look at you for a moment." "Why?" "Because you are beautiful." He smiled, and it was the smile she had fallen in love with, rare and real, and meant only for her. "Because you saved my life. Because I am so grateful every single day that you walked into that garden in your brown wool dress and told me the truth." "What truth?" "That it was all right to be seen, but it was all right to feel. That the walls I had built were not protecting me, they were imprisoning me." He took her face in his hands, those large, gentle hands that had learned every curve of her body and every corner of her heart. "You set me free, Eliza, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that gift." "You don't have to be worthy." She covered his hands with her own. "You just have to be here. That's all I ever wanted. Just you. Present. Staying. I am staying. I know. Always. I know." And when he kissed her, softly, tenderly, with all the love he had spent 6 years learning how to feel again, Eliza understood, finally and completely, what happiness meant. It did not mean the absence of pain. It did not mean that everything was perfect. It did not mean that the ghosts of the past had disappeared, or that the challenges of the future would not come. It meant that whatever came, they would face it together, that they would choose each other over and over, even when choosing was hard, that they would build something real and lasting and true, not out of perfection, but out of persistence. Love was not a feeling, it was a decision. And they had decided. We chose, we stayed, we were bound. Not by obligation, not by expectation, not by the narrow definitions of what a family should be. Bound by something deeper, something that could not be named, but only lived. In the garden, the roses continued to bloom. In the house, the children continued to grow. And in the library, two people who had once believed they would be alone forever held each other in the moonlight and knew, with a certainty that required no proof, that they had found their way home. This is where the story ends, not with a wedding, though there was one, not with a kiss, though there were many, but here, in the quiet of an ordinary evening, in the arms of someone who sees you whole. That is the only ending that matters. That is the ending that lasts.